Howdy, partner. Welcome to one of the most northern parts of the United States of America. Travel with me upriver as we talk to a bunch of ladies and fellers and they share their tales of wit and wisdom. That's right, it's time again for Skagit Storytellers with Liz Rankin.
I like starting our podcast off with talking about how we met, and we met at the liquor store in Concrete.
Yeah.
Which is where I've met a few of my podcast guests. I met Clay there. I met my friend Tara there. You. So Jack was playing for Record Store Day.
Yep.
I think after I met you, Nicole might have told me about you. I think maybe when her and I did her podcast. Because she knew I was into hiking and running and stuff. And
yeah,
she's like, oh, you got to talk to Cheryl. Yeah. So I thought, hey, let's do a podcast on the PCT. Like, we could probably talk about that forever.
I'm sure.
And that's why I'm shocked. Like, have you ever done talks besides the one in Concrete? Have you ever done talks about the PCT?
I haven't, no.
Wow.
Rudy was going to interview me on his podcast, but I don't know if he's still doing that.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, that's something that people definitely would love to hear about, I think. And I really enjoyed your talk at the Concrete Theater. That was pretty cool.
Oh, thank you.
It was awesome.
Yeah, I've never done that.
I thought we would definitely just talk about that. But then when, I forget how it came up, but grief came up somehow. I don't know how.
I don't know. Was I drunk?
Maybe. No. No, maybe it was something about, I wonder if I had posted something about one of my other podcasts, maybe talking about grief, or you and I were talking about what to talk about. I don't know. But
Maybe.
Then you mentioned your sort of like run you've been having. I don't know how to say it.
I don't know, my run of grief.
Your record breaking I'm sure there's a bigger record out there.
Maybe.
But I don't know of it.
I don't either.
So I was like, well, fuck it. Let's just talk about whatever. And you can swear in here, by the way. Doesn't matter. So let loose. So I made the liquor store. So I think besides, I know you have a couple kids. Mm-hmm. You live in Bellingham. You like to hike. You love music. That's all I know. So where are you from? What's your origin story?
I grew up in Ferndale. Technically, I was born in Shelton.
Is that down south?
It's on the peninsula.
Okay.
That was during a short period when my parents ran away from their parents to live somewhere else.
Let's hear about that.
It's just,
why did they do that? They met like in school.
They met in college at Washington State.
Yeah.
And my dad, my family's been in Whatcom County, like going back to my great grandparents. So I think they just wanted to be somewhere on their own for a little while.
Yeah.
And that lasted I think we were 4, or I was 4. We, all of us. I was 4 when we moved back to Ferndale.
And your parents are still around?
Mm-hmm. There's 5 of us. I'm oldest of 5.
Oh, okay.
And so we're all still in Whatcom County. It's a really hard place to leave.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got everything here.
So how do you, did your parents take you outdoors? Is that how you sort of fell in love with? No,
not even.
They kept you inside.
I mean, to an extent, my brothers were Boy Scouts.
Oh, okay.
But that was for boys.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, we would tag along on some of the Boy Scout outings, and my family, my parents are RV campers.
Yeah.
So that was our, the extent of the outside. And I had always wanted to backpack, but I didn't have anybody in my life who did it. And I think, my very first time backpacking, I was 36. I had recently gotten divorced or split up. We weren't legally divorced yet. And I have a tendency to make friends with people wherever I go. And I had tried colon hydrotherapy, and
hydrotherapy.
That's exactly what it sounds like.
Okay.
I have celiac and like a lot of digestive stuff, so I won't go into super detail. But,
like you can swear, but you can't talk about that.
I mean, I'll talk about poop all you want. I think Nicole probably told you that our friends are working on poop lore.
Yes.
Yeah. Poop stories. We have so many good ones. Yeah. We'll have to pick your brain about how to do podcasts. So we're gonna call it a poopcast.
I love it.
Anyway,
so you did the colon thing.
Yes, and I made friends with Vanessa, who is the person.
Of course you did.
And we became good friends. And she actually needed to get out of something. And so she was like, want to go backpacking? I really need an excuse for something she needed to get out of. And I was like, I've never been before, and I always wanted to. And so we made a plan. I put something out on Facebook to find gear because I had no gear. And a friend of mine who was in his like 70s, 80s maybe, gave me all of his old stuff. So I had this like giant external frame pack, and this like everything was super old. Yeah. But we went up Cascade Pass.
Nice.
And it was a little bit of an adventure. It was beautiful the first day, stormy the second day. And
did you go up to Sahali or just Cascade Pass?
No, we went to Cascade Pass, and we were supposed to camp.
Down,
beyond. It starts with a B.
Okay.
Basin Creek, maybe.
Okay.
And the water was really high, and there were no crossings. Like all of the logs were covered, and I'm like brand new, so we're like, no, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
And so we ended up hiking back up, and we found a spot. And I was so brand new. We just found a spot. I didn't know anything about anything. And like, it's a national park. You're only supposed to camp in designated spots with permits. And we explored around a little bit, and we discovered that we were right next to the rangers, their tent pad, those big wooden tent pads. And we had a little bit of whiskey, making our food, getting ready to go to bed. Our tents were all set up and everything. And the ranger comes back, and I think he jumped like 5 feet in the air. He was like, "What are you doing here?"
You're like, "What?"
Yeah. And he was torn. Like, we explained the situation, and it like we didn't have time to hike all the way back out there. We couldn't get to our campsite because it was impassable. And he actually made us move, and he took us to some spots that were under construction, and it just started dumping rain. Like, there was water running into our tents. It was just torrential, and we were like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, we hiked out the next morning. It was it was a eye-opening first experience, but I loved it.
Yeah. Is it the kind of thing where you kind of hate it the whole time, but then after you're like, oh, that was the best? Or did you actually like it as you were doing
I loved it. I loved it the entire time.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things that like always felt kind of out of reach for me, because I didn't grow up doing it.
Well, that's the thing. You said you were 36 when you first did it. So like, why between say 20 and 36, like what held you back from doing it?
I was married to someone who wasn't into outdoor stuff.
Okay. You weren't like, hey, do you want to try this? Didn't even bother suggesting? Just curious.
I might have. I mean,
okay.
I don't really. The thing about me before I got divorced is I spent all of my energy trying to be what I thought everybody else wanted me to be. Yeah. And it was, and I never would have left. I love my ex-husband, always did. But I was unhappy too. We both were unhappy. See how I took that right into divorce?
Yeah. I knew we'd get there.
Yeah. It just, my whole focus was about everybody but myself before that. And we had kids. I mean, I was 29 when I had my first kid. It wasn't like we didn't have time before that.
Yeah.
He was kind of a homebody. I really wanted to join the Peace Corps or like travel after college, and he wanted to come home and buy a house and, do like grown up stuff.
Yeah.
Which I'm grateful for now because I have a house.
Yes.
But at the same time, I've always had the adventure bug, but I was honestly too chicken to go do anything on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you found Vanessa at the colon clinic.
Yes.
Had she done anything like that before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was,
so it wasn't the blind leading the blind.
Yeah.
No, that's what you said to me the other night. Because you're like, what? You've never gone like back, camping in the backcountry?
Oh, yeah.
I was like, not in winter. And you're like, I'll teach you. Because I was like, it's cold. You're like, no, it's not.
No.
What do you mean? Yeah. So then you did that, and it was that crazy experience, and that was the beginning. You're like, that's it. I want to do this kind of thing again. So where did you go from there to the PCT? Like, how long was that in between?
Let's see. So I actually first heard about the PCT in the 90s when it was first made a National Scenic Trail. I was thinking about this last night. One of my professors, I went to architecture school at WSU, and he did a little presentation. And I think he hiked the PCT. Either that or he knew someone who had. I don't remember those details. I just remember this was my first time learning that it existed. And it just sounded like such a beautiful thing to walk from one place to another. And so it was like in the back of my mind as a dream, but it seemed like such a reach. And because I felt like I didn't have enough experience or knowledge or anything, and I didn't really, but I didn't know how to go about getting it. So I think that must have been like 2013 or 14 when I went on that backpacking trip with Vanessa.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to find help learning these things. So my kids, I put them in Wild Whatcom. I wanted them to have like what I didn't get or what I felt like I didn't get. And I remember asking, like, do you do stuff for adults? Like, can you teach the parents how to do these things?
Like, kids, can I read your textbook?
Right? Yeah. Yeah. And I just wanted to learn, but I didn't feel like I could just go out there and figure it out. But I decided when I was trying online dating, and I was like, okay, I'll just choose men who have an actual mountain in their photos and see what I can find that way. And my first time snow camping was on a second date with this guy.
Oh, wow. Where'd you guys go?
By Parkview. It was a complete disaster.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, with the little fire station? Or no, is that...
Well, in theory, but that's not where we ended up.
Okay. You kind of learned from a few people about hiking and backpacking.
But mostly like what not to do.
Okay. But you survived all those moments.
I did.
Yeah.
And then, do you know Washington Hikers and Climbers? It's a Facebook group.
No.
Okay. It was really tiny, like brand new that year. And it came up. I was also kind of new to social media. Like I didn't really know what I was doing on there. And I think groups were new, like a new thing. And I was like, sure, I'll join that. And I like saw all of these posts, and I just decided to meet people on there. And so it was a page to connect people in the hiking climbing world. And it was like, it's huge now. I don't even know how many, 300,000 people, but I feel like it was maybe 300 back then.
Yeah.
And my first time, let me double check. Okay. My first time meeting people, I drove to Stevens Pass to go snow camping up at Skyline Lake with complete strangers. And that was my friend Simon and Eve, who is another like completely badass human. And we had so much fun. I think the next thing I did was somebody who would become one of my besties, Tony, posted, who wants to go up to Hidden Lake this weekend? And it's January, February, whatever. And I had been up there on my own. That was my, I squirrel a lot. Sorry.
No, that's what my podcast is.
Hidden Lake was my very first solo backpacking trip.
Oh, wow.
So after that trip with Vanessa, like I ordered a real backpack and I like started getting gear, like actual gear. And, not that you need it, but it definitely helps to have better gear. And so I just decided I had gone up there with a friend, and we didn't make it up to the lookout, on that trip. I don't think, cause it started snowing like first week of October or something.
Oh, wow.
So we ended up turning around, but then another week or two later, and it was gorgeous. I went up there on a Thursday. And I only was passed by this one other couple. And I remember saying, "Are you going to stay in the lookout?" And they were like, "Yeah, we're hoping to." And I was like, "Me too. Want to share?" And I get up there like just below the lookout and they were setting up a tent. I don't think they wanted to share.
But when you went up there the second time with Tony, it was different weather.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had been up there in the not snow and I had the whole lookout to myself. And it was there that I first, I was kind of thinking about the PCT, and I had bought the book Wild, and all I read was the back cover. I didn't end up reading it until I was on the trail. But I just saw that she had done the trail in 4 months. And my friend Jolene had just moved to Ireland and just moved back. She was in Ireland for 6 months and it seemed like it flew by. And I was like, maybe it wouldn't be that long if I were to go do that. Because I had little kids. They were 5 and 10 at the time. And it just seemed like an impossible thing to be able to do. So that was my first little inkling. And then I'm squirreling again. I will get back to the other Hidden Lake part.
You're good.
So I was dating this other guy, and we went up to, I think he had just had surgery. So we just went up to, Artist Point and like hiked around a little bit. And, we were having pizza at Chair 9 after that. And he said, "I'm going to hike the PCT in March." And I was like, "Cool. I've always wanted to do that." And he was like, "Well, you should do it with me." And I was like, "Oh, I can't. I have kids." Like that just instant response. And he said a few more things like why I should do it. And I just like wrote it off. But then
Kids.
Right. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And he was someone like I perceived had a lot more experience than me and all this stuff. And I called Scott, my ex-husband at the time when I got home, just to be like, "What do you think? What would you think if I did this?" Because my job, we were going to have a big lull in projects. Like the timing would have actually worked out really good job-wise. And he, without hesitation, he was like, "Yes, I know you've always wanted to do it. Go do it. We got this." And I don't think he really knew what he was signing up for, but I was like, "Okay, I'm in. I'm going to do it." And I think like in the back of my mind, I didn't fully trust that this guy was going to actually do it. And so I made a little promise to myself in this little, like tucked it in my little heart pocket and was like, no matter what, if I say yes to this, I'm doing it. And sure enough, I said yes. And I never heard from him. He totally ghosted me. Mm-hmm. And we have talked since then, and actually just very recently, he apologized for all of that stuff, which was really cool. But it was good. I still credit him with like,
oh yeah,
giving me that little nudge to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I made plans to do it on my own. And so I'll go back to Hidden Lake. So I was I got permits for like March-ish, I think, late March. And so at that point I had maybe been backpacking 3 times. And so when Tony was like, who wants to go do Hidden Lake in the snow in February? I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I want to go do this. I really had no business being up there with the my skill level at the time, but I had been snowshoeing, so I had been like just filling some of those gaps there. I wasn't like completely ridiculous by this point. But we chose to do Park Butte instead because I don't know, weather or something. And so I made plans with these complete strangers to meet them at Tony calls it the Piggly Wiggly. It's the grocery store on that corner, like where I think Cook Road and Highway 20 meet. I might be saying the wrong roads.
Oh, the food pavilion?
Yes, that one. Yes. Okay. Yeah. He calls it Piggly Wiggly. So it's just what it is. Yeah, I pull up at 11:30 at night to meet strangers in a parking lot, get in their vehicle, and go into the wilderness with them.
Do you do the thing where you take a picture of their license plate and you send it to your friend?
I don't
No?
think I did. No. No. I don't know. I had good instincts about them too. And not that has always been a perfect idea. And I'm not advocating for this method of meeting people, but it's what I did. They weren't complete strangers because my friend Simon was the previous stranger that I met and went camping with.
Yeah.
He and Eve were good friends with Tony and Casey, who I was meeting in the parking lot. So they vouched for them that they weren't like axe murderers or something. And so I met Tony and Casey, got into his FJ, and like we went up to the hot springs. So we camped at the hot springs the first night.
Oh, nice.
And then we were going to go up to Park Butte the next night. And it was funny. Like we stayed up way too late and hung out in the hot tub. She and my friend Seneca we call ourselves the meat machine. That's its own story. It is not, well, it is what it sounds like. It's about an actual machine full of meat.
Oh.
That we have the wackiest adventures, the 3 of us. And it was one of those you had to be there things, but it became like when we first started hanging out, just the 3 of us, we had that weekend, which was just so weird. It was, I had been in an accident. I was in 3 car accidents in 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
This one had like broken part of my hip. And so I couldn't really do any big stuff. And we just went camping over in the Yakima area. And we ended up camping next to this guy who had a tent full of TVs, and we decided to move because that was just a little too much. And then we stopped at the fly fishing shop that's on whatever that road is that goes along I think that's maybe the Yakima River in Tanum Canyon. And there was a machine full of meat, and we decided to buy meat and cheese, and it gave us back pirate money, like the little gold coins. And
oh my God.
It was, I
love that.
Yeah. And then it just became a thing. We need another meat machine weekend. And because we just had so much fun. And so anyway,
I love it.
That is how I met Casey. And so, after the hot springs night, this was also really funny because Tony ended up sleeping in the hot springs.
Oh,
like face down on a log. And some people showed up at like 5 a.m.
He was just like submerged, like here down, and just like leaning over.
He was, so like the log was like part out of the water.
Oh.
And so he's on his belly on the log, like with his head like on his arm. But when these people showed up at 5 a.m. and screamed, they thought they had found a dead body in the hot springs. So,
oh man.
Yeah. So anyway, it was just a bunch of calamitous adventures with those guys. I think that wasn't even your hike. That was just the hot springs.
It was.
It was. We got up early-ish the next day, and Casey had met this guy Quinn on a bus and invited him to join us. And
I love this girl already.
I know, right? It was he was supposed to meet us at the trailhead, and which the trailhead, when the road is closed, is like at the bottom of the road. But he heard trailhead, and he's like a 4x4 guy, so he aired down his tires, like dodged the roadblock, and like drove all the way up to the trailhead.
Oh my gosh.
And we had no idea. We just assumed, okay, he didn't show.
Yeah.
But he was just a bus guy, so like it's not surprising, right?
And he went above and beyond.
Right? So we snowshoed up the road, and we finally get to the trailhead, and I was up there. I was much more fit at the time. And I called back to Casey. I'm like, hey, Casey, what kind of truck does Quinn have? And she was like, I think it's red. And I was like, I think he's here. And this guy has a truck in a hole, like up to like almost the top of his hood.
Oh my gosh.
He had gone up there, gotten stuck at like midnight after he got off work. And he had been, it's like 9 o'clock in the morning. He had been digging for like 9 hours. And all he was doing was digging himself deeper and deeper into the hole.
Gosh.
So before we even started our hike, this is what had happened.
Yeah.
And so we made a choice. Okay, we're just going to leave it there, and we're going to deal with it when we come back. So we hiked up to Parkview, and it took a while to get there. And I hadn't ever done any serious, like, climbing in the... Not that Parkview is super serious, but it's any backcountry snowshoeing or anything like that. And I had this ancient steel ice axe that my friend with the external frame pack had given me. I didn't know how to use it. I had watched a couple YouTube videos, but I had never practiced anything. And we didn't get up to the lookout until well after dark.
Oh, wow.
And we saw these lights up there, so we were like, oh, there's people, and they're like shining a flashlight, and we're like, oh, they're welcoming us in. And we get up there, and we're really close to the lookout, and at this point it's like it's raining, and it is like really yucky weather. Casey's sleeping bag was entirely wet.
Yeah,
like we really kind of needed to be in there.
Yeah.
And they yelled down, they're like, the lookout's full. And we're like, how many people are in there? And they're like, 2. And we're like, that's not full.
Yeah.
And we would have totally camped outside if it had been appropriate for it. But it was a really fun trip. We came back down, and then we had to, like, Tony and I hiked down and carried his, like, I don't know, equipment for, it's like winchy kind of like,
to get
for pulling, to pull the thing out. And so we had to do that after everything. And that winter we did Hidden Lake, we did Winchester Lookout, and just a bunch of stuff. So that was like all of the backpacking I had done before starting PCT.
Yeah.
And I had connected with this group of 3 guys who was starting around the same time as I was. And I met them one of them to hike Oyster Dome with.
Oh, cool.
To make sure they weren't too creepy before saying, sure, and my plan had been to start with them, and just, it's nicer to start something like that with people that are familiar, and then, ditch them after after a couple weeks. But I ended up hiking the entire thing with Hadley.
It's pretty easy to navigate, would you say?
It's very easy. Okay. It's so well signed. There are apps that outline, like, it's not called Gut Hook anymore. It is Far Out. This app tells you, like, all of the water sources, all of the camping spots. It's really like backpacking for dummies, kind of. It's really it makes it really easy.
So the biggest thing is probably making sure you're physically fit, and maybe just being safe, like being out there with someone else that you trust.
I mean, I've done a lot of through hiking solo now. I don't think you need to be with anybody else on that.
Yeah.
It's whatever your comfort level is. And I actually really love going solo. Honestly, the hardest thing for me was being away from my kids.
I was just going to say that.
When we got into like the JMT part, so the John Muir Trail and the PCT.
So like Northern California?
In the Sierras.
Okay,
yeah. The trails are one and the same for part of it. when we were in that area, there were a lot of families doing, little loop backpacking trips and seeing kids about the same ages as my kids. And I just remember at this point I was hiking with Hadley and James, and the guys were up ahead of me, and I was just like back in the woods, just like tears coming down my face, thinking about my kids. And they were little. It was really hard to leave them. And we had, like, whenever I could FaceTime them, I would hike with them when I had reception and like show them the like cactuses and things like that I could see. But at this point, I think I had been away from them for like 3 months or something like that. I texted my sister. I had an inReach with me. I was like, I need to see the kids. Can you figure out a way to bring them to me?
Aww.
And she was my person, my whole support person, honestly. Some things fell apart, like with finances, and I thought I was going to have to leave the trail. Like that was, the other hardest part. But my sister made it happen. I could not have done it without her.
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, she was like, yes. And she was like, she didn't have any idea how she was going to get my kids to me, but that she would. Honestly, I don't have a memory of being terrified, just sadness when it was over. And, whenever we had to skip parts for different reasons, just, it wasn't a hike. It was like living a different life for 6 months. And then at the end, that life is suddenly over.
It's kind of a common theme amongst ultra runners is that because the races we do are, I don't do 200 and 300s, but some of my friends do. I stick to the 50 and 100s, but you're training for months, and then you're doing this race, and it can be a few days. It's a lot of prep, and sometimes you have people with you, you have a crew, and then you finish, and then it's over. And then you just get this like post-race depression. And how do you fix it? Because from what I found, the only thing that fixes it is signing up for another race.
Yep.
And I'm like, holy crap. Like I talk about like, oh yeah, I'm 6 years sober. I'm not an addict. I'm like, no, I am. It's just different. And so another friend and I were talking about someone else who's just going above and beyond in her running. And, we were talking about like, what is she running from? Like really like... Because I know when I'm on the trail, it's like, don't have to worry about anything.
Yep.
No laundry, no bills, nothing, no relationships. Just, I only have to think about the trail, And you think when people drink, it numbs all the other stuff, And so I guess it's healthier, but also is it really healthy to run 8 hours, come home, pass out, and you don't see your family for the whole day because you're just tired?
Yeah.
They're still passing out. Shoes are expensive, so I'm still spending money,
Yep.
on electrolytes and not beer. So yeah, I was just thinking like, especially after your PCT, like that huge experience, like, did you have that?
Oh, it was huge grief, huge grief. And reentry is hard even after going away for a weekend backpacking and having to come back to regular life. I started calling it regular life instead of real life because it's fair. Like it's almost more real out there, I think. And, but after having, I spent half a year living out of a backpack, and it puts so much into perspective about what we really need. And reentry was really hard for a lot of reasons. My ex-husband, I broke so many agreements. And what I came home to was, this may be one of those, like, don't share thing. I don't know. But, he had moved back into the house while I was gone.
And were you guys divorced at this point?
We were, yes. So we had just finalized it, November before I left on the trail.
Oh, okay.
So this was also kind of a, celebration.
Yeah. Like a honeymoon.
Yeah,
for yourself.
It was for myself, just me. And Scott, like we had our ups and downs with divorce for sure. But like when it was final, we went together to the court and said the things. And then we went out and got a drink and played a game of pool. And it was like our friendship and our kids was priority.
Yeah.
There were definitely ups and downs, like dividing up a life.
Yeah.
When like we had been together since I was 16.
Yeah.
So it was a lot, but, he had, his girlfriend had moved into the house and like taken, like, he was supposed to leave like my stuff in there, which was just something we had agreed on, because he thought he would want to move back out afterwards. And I had told him, I don't care what happens. I just don't want the kids to have to move. So, he moved in there so that they could stay there, and then he wanted to stay. And I was like, okay, well, so I was supposed to move into the mother-in-law cottage, but it wasn't ready. He had tenants in there that were, not moving out until January. So I'm back early October and have nowhere to live.
Oh,
so I am sleeping on my kid's floor, across the hall from my ex-husband and his girlfriend in our tiny little house for 3 months.
Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of negotiations there.
Yeah. Yeah. We should just get into the whole grief.
I'll get into
Everything.
whatever you want to.
Oh, so you got married, or you met your ex when you were 16, you said? Wow.
Yeah.
So high school.
Yeah. But he was a couple years older than me. I think the first time I met him, he gave me and my friend a ride into town, just before like one of our volleyball games. But we actually met at the Linden Fair.
Oh, okay.
I was showing sheep and, I'm a country kid. And yeah, he was there. His sister, was a year older than me. And I knew her, like we were friends, and he was there helping her with her pigs, and yeah, we just hit it off. He came up and made a joke about blow drying the sheep, and
Nice.
because they're like, I feel like I picked the wrong animal to show. You have to wash them so many times,
Oh,
and then
really?
they shit on themselves, and then you have to do it again, and
Oh no.
like blow dry them, and yeah.
It's cute.
Yeah, but
And so when did you guys, so you started dating shortly after?
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, it was. I'm actually a few chapters into writing a memoir that has to do with, I've only written kind of about our early days, and so I have a few chapters on that. But I remember he helped us. He helped me and my dad load up our sheep at the end of the fair.
Yeah.
And he told me he had a bad memory, so he asked if I had a good memory and gave me his phone number. And this is back when you only had to memorize 7 digits.
Yeah.
So the whole way home from Linden, I was like 3840991, 3840991, and it's still in my memory.
Aw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was so chicken to call him, but I did. And yeah.
And then when did you guys get married?
We got married in 1999.
Okay. And how old were you?
22.
Okay.
Maybe 21, 22.
Yeah.
Young.
Yeah.
So young. But I was still in college. My architecture program was 5 years. So this was after my 4th year. And
Was that like an easy decision? Like when he asked you, were you like, of course, like, why didn't you ask me sooner? Or did you?
we had talked about it. So like it was kind of a surprise, but it wasn't at the same time.
It's just what you do. You date for a while, then you get married.
That's really
that kind of thing.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't want to say it callously. Like I've always loved him, but we weren't getting married was not a choice that we made because we wanted to spend the rest of our lives together. It was like the next thing you do.
Yeah.
And it's, and I don't regret it one bit, but it wasn't, I don't really know how to put words to it. I think that we tend to think something has to be wrong for it to not be right. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like, he's an amazing human, and I like to think I am too. And we matched really well in so many ways. And
so how long were you guys married for?
Gosh, we were together 20 years.
Yeah.
We were married for 14, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were around early 40s when you got divorced?
I was 36.
Okay.
Yeah.
Late 30s, yeah.
Because we together, so like from the time I was 16 until 36.
Yeah.
But we were together for a while before we got married.
Yeah.
And it was like really spicy and fun, like our first few years together. And it just sometimes you just grow in different directions.
Yeah.
But I grew up Catholic. Really, like...
Is there, like, pressure to stay married? Is that...
So much.
Okay.
Like, I got in trouble for getting divorced.
Oh, okay.
Everybody's kind of, obviously gotten used to it. But
yeah.
I was the first divorce in my family, like, generations, I'm pretty sure. And it wasn't my choice. It was, we had a lot of growth moments, and neither one of us really knew how to communicate. I mean, I'm not proud of all of the things. Like, I spent the whole first year of our marriage going out, getting drunk, sleeping around with strangers. And
wow.
I was in college, and he was home all the time. And I really, honestly, like... It's not pretty pictures, right? Like, yeah. But there's a lot of growth in those things. And I really was addicted to the attention, and I had never dated. I had never I didn't even have a drink until I was like in my 3rd or 4th year of college.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah. I was, good straight A student, like always doing what everybody else wanted me to do. And
do you feel like your husband wasn't giving you that attention?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Not only was he not in the same town, we had a duplex in Spokane. My 5th year of college was in Spokane. Yeah. And he wanted to go home every weekend and work on his truck. Or when he was in town, like he was playing pool or stuff like that. And that should have been a red flag that maybe being married was not like the right thing, but it was so confusing for me because I loved him and I couldn't imagine not being with him, but it was so exciting to be out and meet new people. And I had, at that point in my life, I had never felt so alive. And so, I've done a lot of personal work since that phase of my life, but those things are kind of symptoms of underlying stuff that can be really hard to name with words. And eventually I told him about that stuff, and we almost split up then. He did some retaliation cheating, and we ended up going to counseling and figuring things out. We actually
did the counseling help, do you feel?
It did. Yeah, it did. Neither one of us had ever been to counseling for any reason. It wasn't something that was valued in our households. But yeah, it helped a lot. And it was, kind of a turning point then too, because I had been offered a job working for, it really was a dream job for me. I was, obsessed with natural building and straw bale construction. And I had my friend Chris, who had been my boss when I worked at 2020 Engineering. He connected me with Terry Phelan, who is an architect in Issaquah. And she was, part of the like Green Building Council and all of the things that were like cutting edge. Like we were like at the early stages of green building when it was still weird, and now it's a lot more common. Yeah. At least the phrasing, whether the follow through is there or not. It's whatever. But Scott didn't want to move. He was working for our brother-in-law at the time, doing post-frame construction. And he was like, I don't think our relationship will survive if you move. And so it was kind of like do I want this job? This was like one of the first big forks in the road for me. Or do I want my relationship? And I chose to stay there. And sometimes I wonder if there's like some parallel universe out there where that version of me is doing who knows what. But I turned that down, and we actually got new rings, and I'll show it to you. They're trees. But if you turn it upside down, they're roots.
Oh.
And so I wear it sometimes still. Yeah. We're divorced. I wear it on the other hand. I wear it as roots because he is always my roots.
Yeah.
And, but from there we built our house, had babies, started a business.
And all distractions.
Yeah. Yep. And then you get to the now what part, right?
Yeah.
And, we actually were really good business partners. We probably should have stayed that way. I don't really believe in failure. It's just an experience. We chose to move on from that experience into new experiences. I honestly think our relationship was really successful because we began as children and we grew into adulthood together. Neither one of us knew how to be adults on our own. And I was in my mid-30s being alone for the first time and with two babies. Luna was 5 and Oliver was like 1. Mm-hmm. And, I was still breastfeeding when so I had them all the time at the very beginning.
Oh, okay.
At least overnights.
So what was like the turning point where you're like, okay, let's separate?
Well, so some
more growth moments.
A lot more growth moments. Yes. I have a very dark sense of humor. So
no, I love it.
I like to think I was a better cheater than he was. I kept it like people I didn't know usually and like far, far away. We were in a really tricky time financially. We had partnered with his sister and that exploded in our business. And, we kind of picked up the pieces and recovered, but it was right in the middle of that recession. Mm-hmm. And, we had to lay off a bunch of employees and we were just really trucking along. And we had somewhere in the middle of all of that started a farm. And it was like...
And you had little babies.
We had little babies. I had an infant strapped to my back feeding pigs that were like biting at my legs and while I'm sinking into mud. Yeah, it was ridiculous. We were trying to run. Like it started because...
This is going to be a good book. Who's going to play you?
Ask Casey. What did Casey say? She said... I think she said Charlize Theron. Well, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but or Nicole Kidman. Maybe it was Nicole Kidman.
Well, depends on when this movie comes out.
I know. I have to write it first. Yes. Well, and I'm writing 2 stories right now too. So, okay. But I'll get to that one.
Sorry, I asked you what the turning point was.
Yeah. It was. So I'm setting the scene here. Yeah. Like. Financial trouble. Our business is like we actually stayed going during that recession. We just had to kind of modify and we were doing a lot of other remodeling and different things than what our typical projects were. And our business survived it, but we didn't. The farm started because we got a pig and the pig had babies and then people wanted pork. And so then all of a sudden we have heritage turkeys and heritage mulefoot pigs and we have 40 pigs at one point in time. And we're
40?
Yes.
I've had pigs. I understand. I've only had we had 5 at one point and that was terrible.
It's a lot. Yeah. And we had joined the Food to Bancom program with Sustainable Connections. So we were all in farming, all in our construction. We had a design build company and with an infant.
Yeah.
And it was that Oliver's first year was like one of the hardest of my life. I gave birth, came home, started working.
Oh,
like
gosh.
he was born at the birth center with midwives out of hospital, and you go home the same day. And I'm just like baby on the bed next to me with papers spread all over, working on proposals and stuff. Yeah, it was a lot. So that's kind of the setting. And Scott was he might have been too modest to say this. I refer to him as a semi-professional pool player. He played in competitive tournaments, and he was really fucking good. As he used to say, I'm kind of a big deal around here. And actually, I think I brought you stickers.
Oh, thanks.
I'm gonna, not that you necessarily want all of my dead people stickers, but so this is one of them.
I saw it on your water bottle.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He played pool, and so we had actually talked about like, I always had the adventure bug, and I was like, let's quit everything. Let's sell our house. Let's buy a motorhome. Let's just go travel around to pool tournaments. And I was supporting him in his pool career, and he was going out to the bars and playing pool a lot and other stuff. And eventually he went to one of the regional tournaments down in Oregon, and he met somebody that this is a story that's in my book. He actually met somebody and that he fell in love with and wanted to end our marriage, but she didn't want to be with him. But he had been dating someone back here. I call her the gas station girl. So it was somebody he met at the gas station. And the reason this is so, I don't know. It's funny, not funny, but he came home from that and said he didn't want to be married anymore. And it seemed out of nowhere to me, and it didn't make sense, and it like completely rocked my world. And I remembered getting some weird, this was back when you would get notifications for your text messages being over the limit.
Oh, okay.
And I remember thinking, that's weird. And so it's like 2 a.m. I can't sleep. I look up our records, and there's a whole bunch of phone calls and texts between this other number. So I called it, and the gas station girl answered the phone, and we talked for like 2 hours.
Oh my God.
He had told her that we were separated, but still lived on the same property. And, that's how he was acting, but he didn't tell me. So, it was, growth moments. Mm-hmm. And it was, kind of mind blowing still. Like she was complaining to me about him falling for someone in Lincoln City. And I'm like, the woman my husband's cheating on me with is complaining to me about the woman he's cheating on her with. And I'm like,
she's looking for sympathy. You're like, yeah.
How is this my life right now? And
it should be a book.
It should be a book. And it obviously those things really hurt. Yeah. It wasn't, honestly, I've discovered that I am poly. At least in mindset, if not in practice, because I don't always have the capacity for multiple people.
Ask, like, since when he said, I don't want to get married or be married anymore, and you were like, whoa, how long between that and your realization of like, whoa, like, I actually don't want to be married. I like, thank you for being the one to say it. Like, was there like a moment of time where you're like, oh, you know what? I don't either. Thanks for being the one to say it.
It was I think it was a while. Yeah. Because at that point in my life, I was so afraid of change, so resistant to being uncomfortable. And I had never really had to be.
Yeah.
And now the prospect of my marriage ending and being like a single parent of baby. Like it was really scary. And so at first I was really in resistance, and I remember talking to my friend about it, who actually was one of the people he had cheated with. And she was like, no, he can't leave you. And I was like, you're right. He can't. And I said, we talked, and, I convinced him to spend time working on it. Like we'd been here 20 years. Let's go to counseling. Let's see, leave all of our cards on the table. And so, this is, and I think he really did try. But and we got to a way better place during those 6 months. But these pool tournaments are 6 months apart. He went to another one, and he saw that the same person again. And it, you know, she was with somebody else at the time, but she was kind of like I had someone poke me into doing the PCT. This was like, she poked him into leaving. And what he told me was that he wanted to be free. And I remember saying, okay, consider yourself free.
She was just the catalyst.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so when he got home from that trip, like, I think we stayed up for like 24 hours talking and crying. And like, I mean, there was, he was afraid to walk away from it too. Like, it was all we had ever known as grownups. And, he was, really, like, I don't know, he took off on his motorcycle, and he was working for my brother-in-law at the time, to Doug. And I remember Doug calling me and like, what is going on with Scott? Where is he? And so I told him that we were splitting up and whatnot. And I was still like, I don't think I ate for a week. I was, during that 6 months, we had closed our businesses to see if we could stay married. He had gone back to work, and I was trying out being a stay-at-home mom. So I had no recent work experience. All of my work experience was self-employment for the last like 8 or 9 years. And it was kind of a scary place. But I remember my friend Rebecca, she and her now ex-husband, they were living in one of our apartments, and they took me and the kids to the beach one day, and they were just so, it was, I remember that day so vividly in my mind, and I don't even know what they said to me, but I really realized that loving him was not clinging to him. It was allowing him to be free. And I came home from that trip to the beach, and I wrote him a letter that I think probably still have somewhere, that just said, you know, I love you, and I will always, always love you. And I realized that loving you is not keeping you. And it really was kind of my first experience realizing that, because all growing up, I had very different ideas of what love was supposed to look like. It also, you know, there was the whole rejection element, and because it felt like also devastating to be left. Like, that's yeah. It's a ego and safety, and like, because I associated him with safety too, and all of those things. But and even as I remember writing that letter with shaky hands, because it was fucking scary, and because I, like, the night before, like that 24-hour conversation, I just, like, I was mad, and I was sad, and I was scared. And he was like, okay, well, we can try for another 6 months. And it wasn't what he wanted. He just didn't want to be that person, the person that made me upset.
Yeah.
And, like, in reflecting back on who I was back then, I mean, it's a little embarrassing even to talk about, really, because
The way you're describing yourself, I'm like, that's not the Cheryl I know. You know?
It's not.
Yeah,
it's not. But I had to go through all of that to get here. And it's lots and lots and lots of growth moments. And I've dated other people. I've loved other people. I've let other people go. I tend to be the one who's left, not the one who does the leaving. I rarely have I been the breaker upper.
Yeah.
But I'm not like good at calling things necessarily, because I can always find something to love about everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of why I'm still single, 10 years later, is I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to get too deep in something and like not have it be the right thing and either have to hurt someone or be hurt or, I don't know. And I really also there's a quote I came across a long time ago that I'm going to butcher, but it really is that loving someone isn't it's wanting them to be the best version of themselves and to be free, whether or not that involves you. And so to really love someone it's not dependent on reciprocation.
Yeah.
And really, I put that into practice in my life, and I find that I love really easily. And my life is so different now than it was then. I was isolated. I was miserable. I had a few friends from high school, but I didn't, the community of friendships that I have in my life now are all because Scott was brave enough to leave our marriage, because I never would have. And so I can't really tell you when I realized that I wasn't happy and that it was a gift that he had given me. I think it was one of those things that just knowledge that materializes versus an aha moment. I always will be grateful. It was throwing me out of my cocoon and making me fly.
Yeah.
That's a really cheesy metaphor, but
well, no, and I didn't even know. So on Facebook, I had seen that I think maybe you had posted something about maybe selling his truck or something. I was like, okay, so Cheryl's divorced. I didn't understand that. No, I think I thought that he had passed away while you guys were married. I didn't know you were divorced. So, so we talked about your divorce. So now let's talk about the big four. And I'm just saying that because of your dark humor.
All my dead boyfriends.
Yeah. So, was Scott the first one that passed away? Okay.
Nope, he wasn't. So the first was Evan.
And when did you start seeing him?
Well, I'll give you my Evan stickers.
Wait, so you have stickers for all your... I'll just take one of each. I don't want to take two.
Well, yeah, this is
Oh, so you made these?
His brother-in-law designed that, actually.
Okay.
And that's Scott, if you want a visual. That's what he looks like. This is a painting that my friend Nicole did. Nicole Bishop, she's an incredible artist.
Oh, okay.
So this was a custom piece that she did.
Wow. It's cute.
Yeah, he was. We made cute babies. Evan, we met at Chair 9.
Okay.
And had just a fun night.
Yeah.
And it was this weird situation. This was September of 2019, I think. We had gone out to his truck for a bit. Glacier, it's like a black hole of cell phone reception. I had left my purse and all of my things inside, And so I didn't have my phone on me. I had nothing but my little glass of whiskey that I had carried out there. And he had me put my number into his phone and send him a text. So I'm the one that put it in. I'm the one that sent the text message. Yeah. And he thought he had Wi-Fi connection from the office. Yeah. But I never got it. I never got that message. So, and he was camping there. He was installing all the toilets up at the ski area. He was a plumber. All I knew is his name was Evan. He was a plumber and a snowboarder that that Mount Larrabee was his favorite climb he had ever done. And that's this right here.
Oh, okay.
So I never heard from him, and he was a lot younger than me. 15 years younger than me. I was just like, it was just a fun night, you know, like I figured if he had like looked at his phone, like, and seen that it didn't go through or whatever, maybe it was in his, there was no way I could contact him at all. So I dated somebody else in that fall. That was the year of 3 Bens. I had 3 different Bens.
Oh yeah, I remember I told you that my buddy Ben would always take me out hiking, and you're like, "What's his last name?" I was like, "No, it's not one of your 3 Bens.
It's not one of the Bens." COVID came along, and it was like April 3rd or 4th. We're just kind of getting the stay-at-home order, and I was headed out for a bike ride with Oliver, and I get this text out of the blue, and it said, "Hey Cheryl, this is Evan. We met at Chair 9, and like, I don't know if you remember me, but we met at Chair 9, something like that." And I was just flipping through my phone, and I realized that my message to you never went through, and I had always wondered why you never responded.
Oh.
And I was like, it's because I didn't get it.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like we picked up where we left off, and he had left another relationship, and you know, it was COVID, so it wasn't like we could go out anywhere or even really connect. So we were FaceTiming for like 4 or 5 hours every night. And we finally, a week later, decided to meet up, and we were both in kind of a weird place. He was living at his brother's house and working on their remodel while he lived there. And I had my kids 100% of the time, because Scott was, he was dating someone who, like, so many stories. we could sit here for like 12 hours. The Cliff Notes is he was dating someone who was unsafe for my kids. Okay. Yeah. And I was actually in the process of getting a protection order against her. And so he had asked if I would hold off on that and let him deal with it. Got it. And so I said yes, as long as you keep them away from her. And so I had them all the time. And I don't date with my kids. Very few people I've ever dated have met my kids, unless I tend to stay friends with them too. So like sometimes after, but, so it wasn't an option for him to come to my house. And so he had, I don't think I've ever like publicly told this story. This is the other, I'm writing this story too, but, his friend Dave has a house on Toad Lake, and he was going to be moving into that house afterwards to remodel that. And so like living there and working on it. And it wasn't a livable house. So we hung out on the dock, and he brought a heater and like blankets, and we sat there and just talked and talked and talked for hours, and then maybe got naked on the dock. And the thing is, I did not realize how close all of the other houses were because it's dark out. But it was just a really fun, beautiful night.
Yeah.
And he asked me to come over, and I was like, I need to get home to my kids. I can't. The next day was Easter, and there's all like these other pieces that I have like filled in with other people, but like this was just my like perspective at the time. I was focusing on my kids. We had just gotten chickens, and like we were putting our chicken house together. So we were doing a Zoom Easter with my family. My kids were with Scott, so I decided to hike up to Pine and Cedar and do Easter Zoom meeting up on the rock up there. When I told Evan that I was taking a hike, it seemed like he wanted to go with me, and I could have just said I'm doing my family Zoom Easter, and that's weird. But I think he thought like I didn't want him to come hike with me or whatever. So I don't know. I didn't end up seeing him that day, but we made plans for the next day. This was April 13th, and he was dirt biking with his uncle and his dad that morning. And he sent me a photo, which I'll show you if you want.
Yeah.
And we exchanged, Nicole says hi.
Oh.
We exchanged some messages, and just like, I really like where this is going and stuff like that. And he asked me to come hang out on the dock again that night. And so we made plans. I went and picked up food at Brandywine Kitchen, and we were just going to have a little date on the dock. And it was daylight this time. So
you're like, oh, look at all the houses.
I was like, oh my gosh, those houses are real close. And that's fun. That's the...
Aw.
Yeah. And that's him. He's such a cutie. Yeah, so we get down to the dock. There was this like giant old picnic table that he picked up over his head and carried it down to the dock and like plopped it. And I was just like, he impressed me with his strength. Yeah. And then we sat on this picnic table, and we talked for hours. And I remember, I was telling him some of my stories and what was going on in my life, and he was telling me some of his, and he was telling me about how he like broke his ankle and like all of this like crazy shit that he did. And I remember I'm looking in his eyes as he was telling these stories, and I was like, this guy is going to break my heart someday. And I was thinking like avalanche or like snowboarding accident, like something like that. And cause it was that night, like there at that picnic table, that we decided like this is a thing, we were going to see where it was going. Like I had never even used the word boyfriend, or like he called me his girl that night, and like Aww. Just but it was, and I was like I was really excited about him, really into him, but also like really hesitant. Like there's got to be something wrong with him. Yeah. Like he's too perfect. And like I had in my time like being in online dating, which I don't really like it. But there were a lot of younger guys that I think like had older woman fetish and like just wanted to be with an older woman just for, whatever. Yeah. And so a part of me was like, but his girlfriend before me was even older than me, and they'd been together like a few years. Yeah. So I was like, okay. And then he was like, my mom was 10 years older than my dad. And I was like, okay, so it's genetic, I guess. So like I was letting my guard down, and when I was telling him like all the stuff that was going on with my kids, it was really, really devastating, because the woman that Scott was dating at the time had been my friend, and it was a really complicated situation that like involved my work and everything. And to be clear, like when they first started dating, I was happy that he was dating my friend. So it wasn't a problem because her dating my husband.
Yeah.
It was other stuff.
Yeah.
But he said to me, you don't have to worry about making extra time for me. We're going to figure this out.
Aw.
I'm not going anywhere. We have all the time in the world. And that is this tattoo right here. His one of his ex-girlfriends I've become friends with, Jackie, she's awesome. And she shared with me some poems that he had written for her and in his handwriting.
Oh
so
my gosh.
my friend Amy, Painted Heart Arts, she's my tattoo artist, and she was able to take his handwriting from those poems. And
Wow.
so this is his handwriting.
That's a beautiful tattoo.
His ashes are in the ink. And
Oh my gosh.
the thing is, like, we do have all the time in the world. We do. And we just don't know how big the world is for all of us, or how small and short. But it was after that, I still can see the glint in his eyes when he looked over at the boat, and it's this Livingston style boat, which is the seat in the middle and then two like troughs on either side. And, he went and flipped it over and was like testing it out to see if it was stable, and seemed to be. And I was like, oh, you want to do that? Okay. And I thought we were just going to like paddle out to the like middle of the lake. I did like have to go back to my kids at some earlier point.
Oh, and so this is the day after Easter.
This is
when
Monday.
you lifted up the picnic table and you guys. Oh, so that night. Okay.
That night.
This is like your third date.
Second real. I mean,
well, because I guess
if
you
you
met him
count-
at the
Yes.
first time. Yeah.
It
Second
was-
real date.
Yes.
Okay.
Our second real date.
Oh my gosh.
And we get in the boat, and like he wanted to paddle down to the other end of the lake, and where there aren't so many houses.
I see.
So we did, and it was this kind of disaster where like he's paddling on one side and I'm paddling on the other, and I am a pretty strong paddler, and I was making fun of him because the boat kept going this way because I was getting more purchase with my paddle, but we just kept kind of like going toward the shore.
Yeah.
And we got to this little spot, pulled the boat off, like set up a blanket, hung out there for a while. And one of my strongest memories of that moment there was, I love the view of looking up at the sky through the trees, laying on your back on the ground. And it is just one of my most favorite views in the world. And I remember talking about that night. And I also remember, he had told me he loved me the other night. And I remember being like, I mean, like I feel like love is easy. Like I love people instantly.
Yeah.
And I said that, and I was like, I didn't say it that night, but this moment on the blanket, we were talking again, like, and we were, he was like, he wanted to own that house someday, and he wanted this. And we like talked about, we even had this little scenario where like we would live there and then like rent out my house. And, I remember saying that how I felt like love is easy. Like he was a super easy person to love. And I was like, but that isn't the whole picture. Like we have to like see if the life stuff works, because love is the easy part. And I don't think I've ever told somebody I love them that quickly. And, but in hindsight, I'm glad that I did. And I remember he was getting a little nervous about, it was dark, like the sun had gone down and like the sky was getting darker. It must have been like a new moon or close to that. But he wanted to get back. And so we got in the boat. We got on the same sides as we had sat on the way down. So we were going more out toward the middle with the way we were paddling. And I remember looking down at one point, I felt like water around my ankles, and I looked back, and the boat is kind of like tilted, like water's coming in over the back end of the boat. And it was like, it was still floating, and it wasn't like, it was maybe this much water. What I didn't know was there were compartments underneath that had already filled with water.
Oh.
They were like, so it seemed like an urgent thing, but not an emergency. And we didn't have life jackets, and I could swim across that lake and back fairly easily. Like it's, my grandparents have a cabin on Cane Lake, and I've like crossed that lake and back. And so it didn't occur to me that I would need to worry about it. And he said, we need to get back. I don't think I can swim. And what I heard is, I don't know how to swim.
Oh my gosh.
I now know isn't true. Like, he could swim. He had swimming lessons and whatnot. And he like had paddle boarded and stuff like that, but he wasn't a super strong swimmer. And he had wrecked his dirt bike earlier that day, like flipped it and landed on like crushed a stump with his chest. And so he was feeling pretty physically wrecked. And so I think that was what he meant. But when I heard that, getting out of the boat wasn't an option if he couldn't swim. And I had like, the thing you do when something like this happens is you go back over every moment, and like, I would have done this differently and this and this and this. But in the moment you're living, you're doing the best you can with what you have. And I now know exactly what happens when a boat sinks. But what happened in my perception was, all of a sudden the boat fell out from underneath us, and I felt like I was falling.
Oh my gosh.
And when I remembered this and relived it over and over, it never made sense to me. Like, why would I feel like I was falling? We were sitting on the water. And in the sleepless nights that followed this, I researched obsessively what happens to a boat when it sinks. And it creates a tunnel kind of air mixed with water. So it's lighter than water, which is why I felt like I was falling into this tunnel. And then, because as the boat, it just like shoots straight to the bottom.
Wow.
And so we fell into that tunnel, and then like water closes in over the top of us. And I don't actually have a memory of being underwater. I have a memory of resurfacing. And I remember still, like, I'm not thinking this is an emergency. Like, time has kind of stopped and really warped for me.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of getting my bearings. The other thing I should say is, like, my fear response is to gasp. So when I felt the boat fall away, I like, I like sucked in all of my air. So I went into that situation with full lungs. I don't know what he did.
Got it.
And so I was wearing a puffy jacket. I had my like phone in the zipper pocket of that. I had like yoga pants and flip-flops on. And I remember thinking it was really hard to tread water. The like pants were kind of falling down, and the flip-flops were making it hard. And I remember thinking, I like these flip-flops. I'm not just going to kick them off. So I reach down and I take them off, and I'm holding them in one hand, and I'm getting my bearings, and I see this like lighted like water slide dock like right in front of us. It was really not far. Some of this stuff I might later be like, maybe don't share that, but
Yeah.
I'm a super open book. I just like, I'm pretty woo woo. I also do clairvoyance work and energy healing, aura readings and whatnot. So I'm going to just share all my woo woo and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
I heard his voice say, "Cheryl, please." And that made me look over to him. I have only told like a few people this whole story. And his, only his eyes were sticking up out of the water. So he's vertical in the water. It's up to here. There's no way he said those words. And my brothers were in Boy Scouts. I, tagged along to some of the things where they learned how to swim and how to like rescue. And so I remember it being beaten into everybody's head. Like, you don't try to rescue a drowning person without flotation or whatever, like, because a lot of drownings are people who are trying to save someone else from drowning.
Yeah.
And I, like, my kids are on my mind, like all of this stuff. But I'm like, I made a beeline for him, like no hesitation, but I came up behind him and I grabbed the back of his jacket and held his head up out of the water. So my arm is outstretched, holding him out of the water like this, because in my mind, I just thought I needed to get like his mouth out of the water so he could breathe. Mm-hmm. And, I still have shoulder issues to this day from that.
Wow.
But I was all adrenaline. I never once in that whole experience did I feel like I couldn't save myself. I didn't feel like I was in danger. I guess I was, they say, but, I swam right up to him. I grabbed his jacket and I said, "Come on, Evan, I've got you. I just need you to kick." Didn't move a muscle. His eyes were just like straight ahead. And this is when I realized, okay, this is really wrong. Something's really wrong here. And I tried to swim with him and I couldn't get anywhere. He was wearing Carhartts. He was like, heavy shoes, heavy jacket, all of the things. And it really was like, I mean, the distance from one end of your house to the other was how far we were from that dock, probably. I mean, I could have swam there myself in a minute. We were so stupidly close. And time for me was super slowed down. But so I don't actually know how long all of these things took in between. But as soon as I realized I couldn't swim with him, I started screaming. And 'cause I'm just always like I can do it myself person. Like, it never occurs to me to ask for help. It just doesn't. People, I saw them come running out onto their deck, sliding glass door. I saw them jump in their boat and head straight right for us. And I'm treading water, holding him up. And, my next memory is, coming up for air. And, I have woo-woo memory of that time, and I'll come back to that. But I am like coughing water out of my throat. The people in the boat are yelling at me. "You need to keep yelling. We can't see you." I remember thinking, what are you talking about? I've been yelling this whole time. And then I realized I'm not holding on to him anymore. And so physically, what happened is when all of the air finally leaves the lungs, that's when the body sinks and all the way to the bottom. And that lake is like 100 feet deep, 120. I had no idea. And in my mind this whole time, so they got to me shortly after that, and I was expecting this guy is going to jump in and David Hasselhoff him, like he's going to get him out of there. Yeah. And he's just looking at me like, I'm not going in there. And I'm like halfway had pulled myself into the boat, and I was like, I'm going back in. And he was like, "No, you're not. You get in this boat." And like, it was just like, okay. And there were like 5 or 6 other boats around at this time. I knew somebody had called 911. In my mind, he was just right there and they were going to get him and it was going to be fine. And so I got in the boat and they took me to their house and I walked in their door, not even thinking about it. I just took all of my clothes off. I was hypothermic and knew I needed to get out of them, but it wasn't a conscious choice. It was like, I just did it. And then I'm standing naked in these strangers' living room. And I was like, can I have a towel? And I think she took my clothes and put them in the dryer. And I sat there, wrapped in this stranger's blanket. And I was so numb. And I just believed that he was going to be right back. And, he wasn't.
Wow.
Yeah. They didn't find his body until noon the next day. I was, in a bath. My daughter had made me a bath, and it was almost like intuitively like I needed to be in water too or something. Cause I couldn't, it had even turned cold, and I couldn't make myself get out until, Galena was the support officer who talked with me that night, and she called to tell me that they found him. So I had never met any of his family. I knew his brother's name, his uncle's name, and I had his sister-in-law, and the women whose house I was in had encouraged me to reach out to his family. But like, what do you say? All I said was, please call me about Evan. But I gave, I remember talking to the police, and they did try to find him. The divers tried, but it was so dark, they couldn't see him. And my kind of woo-woo experience with this was, I have a very distinct memory. And for this to have been like I think I left my physical body, and because I would have had to have been like laying horizontal, looking straight down at the bottom of the lake for this to be possible. And I know I physically wasn't. I just remember our eyes locked, and I can see his hair kind of like floating against his face, and just watching him drift like down, 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 down. And it was kind of like our underwater goodbye. And I think that when his body sank, it pulled mine under with it, and my hand must have let go of him on survival reflex, because I don't have a conscious memory of doing that, or of being under the water either time. I just have my woo-woo memory of it. And I do aura readings and stuff like that, but I have a hard time sometimes reading my own. My friend Jill is also my mentor, and oddly enough, Evan was her sister's grandson, or her cousin's they were related.
Wow.
And so she reached out to me before anyone even knew that I was the person. The papers just referred to me as the woman. But she reached out and she said, "Cheryl, was it you who was with Evan?"
Oh my gosh.
And she saw, this is like, I'm a super open book, but some of the stuff that is like, that's woo woo, I'm like, okay, people are going to think I'm a nut job here. But, what she saw was that, because part of what I believe is that we exist as spirit, and that we take on a human body to experience being human, and that, our human life is like a blip on the radar of our like spiritual existence, and that we kind of make contracts with our spirit friends before our lives, and we choose kind of what we want to learn and whatever. And what she saw was that he was born in Ukraine, and he was adopted at like 18 months old. His mom and I have since become pretty close, and
wow.
I love her so much, and I am so grateful for my relationship with her. His whole family is really amazing, and before meeting them, I was so afraid that they would hate me because I was the one who survived, and when he didn't. And it's still like, man, like they're just, every single one of them has been so kind and loving, and which doesn't surprise me at all, knowing him, you know.
Yeah.
But she saw a past life for him that had originated in Ukraine, where he had died a traumatic death alone, and this lifetime was part of the purpose was to heal that one. And so our contracts with each other involved showing each other unconditional love, like, and being able to fully experience that. And for me to be with him when he died, to help him transition in a less traumatic way. And, you know, you might think like this was a super traumatic experience, like, but for everything I've read about drowning is that it is like the most peaceful way to go.
Wow.
And one of my friends told me her friend had a near drowning experience, and she actually like punched the person who saved her in the face because they took her out of that space.
Oh.
And it really, whether any of this stuff is like the truth or not, it brought me peace to think when he left his body, he was with someone who loved him unconditionally. He wasn't alone, and it gave me some peace to know that.
No, first of all, don't care if anyone thinks you're a nut job, please. Like, there are...
I mean, I kind of am.
You could be boring.
I know, right?
Oh my gosh. I wasn't expecting a story like that. You tell it so well. I'm excited to read your book.
My writing coach, that was one of the first things she said when I told her that story. She was like, you need to learn screenwriting because
forget the book, just do a screenplay. Yeah.
You
get a bunch of musicians around here that could write some songs for you.
Oh yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
It would be the best soundtrack ever.
Yeah. Wow, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Wow. And I mean, I was joking about like, okay, let's hear 4 stories of death. And God, that was the first one.
It was the first one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. No, I was going to say, because we're at our mark. We're done. And no, that just means that I'll edit this. I'm going to put this out and you're going to come back.
Okay.
Yeah. We're going to hear more about this because I'm not rushing this and not chopping it down to an hour. Like this is part 1 of Cheryl.
There's a lot.
Yeah. No, this is great. Yeah. Great teasers for your book.
Yeah, here we go.
So keep writing.
Okay. I will do
I don't want you coming back and be like, well, I haven't done anything since I was here last. Like,
I might very well do that.
Well, that's why I have that. You only fail if you stop writing. So do you know any Stephen Pressfield books? The War of Art. I think you would really enjoy it.
Okay.
To help you get through some stuff, then you can come back here and share your updates. So
okay, that's a great title.
Yeah.
I am friends with resistance, very, very much so.
Yeah. But hey, if you want to do something if you want to go work at Taco Bell, resistance is like, hey, I'll let you do that. And that's the thing is like, you know that if, what you're doing is important, then there's going to be pushback, and that's good. That means you're on the right path. So it's good that it's hard to sit down and write. That means you're on the right path. Yeah. Well, thank you, Cheryl. I can't wait for part 2. Thanks for coming over.